Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Kendra. If you are new here and you like true crime, I suggest you hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about the case of Samantha Lee Josephson. This is definitely going to be a two-part series, so if you're seeing this video first, stay here and watch part 2 afterwards. Samantha, who also went by the nickname Sami, was 21 years old, born on August 13th, 1997 in Princeton, New Jersey, to Seymour and Marcy Josephson. She was one of 2 daughters with a sister named Sydney. The Josephson family raised the girls to be Jewish, and they eventually resided in Robinsonville, New Jersey, where Samantha and Sydney would grow up. After high school, Sami attended the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, majoring in political science. As a senior, she was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority. She studied abroad in Barcelona, and she also visited Madrid and Paris. She had plans to graduate in June 2019. She earned a full scholarship to Drexel University School of Law. She inspired to practice international law as her choice of career path for her future, and it was one of her main goals in life. She worked very hard to reach this goal. As most who attend college, Sami did drink, she did hang out with friends on school nights, but she was a very responsible adult. She was very hardworking, she definitely got things done, and she was far from a procrastinator. She had an extremely outgoing personality, she was very bubbly, and she definitely had a bright future ahead of her that she was anxious about and deserved. During college, Sami started a relationship with a man named Greg Corbishley in spring 2017. They dated for about a year before it was time for Greg to graduate. Even though that meant that they wouldn't be going to the same college anymore, they definitely still continued their relationship. They couldn't be together in person, but they always were texting, they were on phone calls, and they were FaceTiming almost throughout their whole entire day unless they were at work. Greg would go out to Columbia every few weekends to go visit Sami, but Sami herself never went to Charleston to visit Greg. Sami and Greg's relationship was considered a healthy and happy relationship. They trusted each other and they were each other's best friends. Sami was friends with Greg's friends, and Greg's friends were friends with Sami's friends. On Thursday, March 28, 2019, Sami was at home with her roommates having a few drinks while deciding their plans for the rest of the night. Sami, of course, was texting Greg, and Greg says that Sami was feeling a little bit down this night and a little sad due to finding out that a family member had been diagnosed with a medical condition. Because of this, she felt a little bit guilty going out and having a good time with her friends. But Greg had told her that she just had finished law school and that she deserved a night out to celebrate with her friends and to just let go of all of her stress and to have a good time. Around 9:30, 10 p.m., Sami is trying to convince Greg to come and visit her and to head out with her and her friends. But Greg already had plans to drive the 2-hour drive to come visit her the following weekend, which would be 2 days later. So he told her that he couldn't, but he would see her soon. Sami and her roommates decide on their plans and they head out. They leave their apartment at the Hub, which is a college community apartment complex that all the USC students reside. They all end up going to a friend's house, and then they get to an area in Columbia called 5 Points around 12:15 a.m. 5 Points is also known for its shopping, restaurants, and nightlife. This is a place where all of the college students in town go to hang out on the weekdays and also on the weekends. At the time that Sami and all of her friends arrive at 5 Points District in downtown Columbia, she's still feeling sad and keeps throwing out the idea of Greg coming to visit her, but he keeps telling her the same thing. And her friends head into different bars, but before ending their night, they end up in a bar called the Bird Dog, which is located on 715 Hardin Street. The Bird Dog was a regular place for Sami and her friends to attend, and even Greg had been there countless times. Around 2 a.m., Sami decides that she's had enough of being out and walks out of the Bird Dog without telling her friends that she's leaving. But she's still in contact with Greg, as she usually is, and she lets him know around 2:04 a.m. that she's leaving and that she had called an Uber to pick her up to bring her back to the Hub, which is her apartment. Greg and Sami shared their locations with each other, so Greg, after a few minutes, checks her location on the app called Find My Friends, just to make sure that she's gotten home safely. When he checked her location, which was updated every 5 seconds on this app, he noticed that her phone was moving in the opposite direction of her home. He began to text her, but when his texts that would normally quickly say read were sending as delivered. I am sure that most of you know that you can go in your settings and turn your send receipts on, which would mean if you have them turned on, if someone were to send you a text and you open the text message, it would let the sender know that you had read the message. If you have your read receipts off, when you go to open the message, they can't see that you read it. It would just show the sender it was delivered. So when Greg texted Sami, it was only saying delivered. It wasn't saying that she had opened it and read it. After not getting a response back, he decided to call Sami, and Sami was not answering. It was just ringing and ringing before eventually going straight to voicemail. He said he didn't think much of it that Sami's phone was headed in an opposite direction. He said maybe her and her friends decided that they would go to another friend's house before heading home, but he didn't know that Sami was traveling home alone in the Uber. He thought that she was still with her friends. He continued to still track her phone's location, which on her phone reached Montgomery Avenue. Her location after that was no longer able to be tracked. He says during their whole entire relationship, Sami had never hid her location from him, and same with Greg. Greg never hid his location from Sami. Greg was always able to see where she was if he decided to check on her. He thought maybe at this point Sami had left her phone in the Uber, so around 3:30 in the morning, Greg decides to get a hold of her roommate Tegan Berry, asking if Sami was home yet. Tegan lets him know that she wasn't sure if Sami was home because she wasn't even aware that Sami had left the bar. Tegan and Sami also shared their locations with each other on that Find My Friends app, so she too saw that Sami's phone's last location was also on Montgomery Avenue. But when she talked to Greg, she assured him that Sami was probably at home and agreed she most likely had left her phone in the Uber. Greg ended up falling asleep around 5 in the morning, but Tegan and Sami's other roommates decided on the way home that they would go to Montgomery Avenue to check to see if they can find Sami or maybe her phone, or just see if they can find anything regarding Sami at this location. But after arriving, they didn't find anything, no signs of Sami, so they headed home. Tegan says when she arrived home, she had walked to her room passing Sami's bedroom. She noticed Sami's bedroom door was still open and that she still wasn't home. She also said that she noticed Sami's work shoes still in the same spot that they were, and it stuck out to her because she knew that Sami had to be at work at 11 a.m. at the Liberty Tavern. But she had been drinking that night, so she didn't really think too much of it, and she just went to sleep. Tegan woke up around 10:30 in the morning and noticed that Sami still was not home. Her bedroom door was still open and her shoes were in the same spot, which was an indication to her that Sami never came home. She started to grow concerned at this point, and she decided to text the group chat of all their roommates. Now, there's a few different people that live in this apartment. I want to say that there's 4. I'm not really sure, maybe 5, but they had their own little group chat as roommates. They all came out of their rooms right away, and they all had a group meeting in the living room to discuss what their next steps should be. They called jails, they called hospitals describing Samantha, but they didn't have anyone matching her description. They also called her workplace to see if she had shown up for her shift at the Liberty Tavern, but employees verified that she had not shown up for her shift at 11 a.m. They also made it clear that this was unlike her and that she had never just not shown up for work or called in. Tegan and the other roommates decided to hack into Sami's laptop to see if they can get any leads on to where she might be. When opening her emails, they quickly noticed an email from Uber. This email was a receipt for a canceled Uber ride, which was also stating that it was canceled by the driver and not Samantha. This was extremely confusing for all of them because Greg had said that Samantha called an Uber and that she was headed home. They also saw her phone's location leaving the 5 Points area. This prompted them to go to the last location that Samantha's phone was in, which was the Montgomery Avenue area. But again, when they went there, they didn't find any signs of her. They didn't find her phone, nothing out of the ordinary. During this time, around 11 a.m., Greg is now just waking up and gets a phone call from another roommate of Sami's named Carly, finding out that Samantha still had never made it home. Greg got in his car and drove immediately to Columbia to see if he can help find her. Around 1:30 p.m., friends and roommates decide to report Samantha missing. They could not get in contact with her. They went to the last known location her phone was. They just weren't getting anywhere, and they just were getting concerned the more time was going by. When arriving at the hub where Sami lived about 2 hours later, police were already there taking reports from all of her roommates. Greg lets one of the officers know when the last time he spoke to Sami, and the officer takes Greg outside to interview him and to get all of his information. After the police leave, due to this being the only lead that they had to go off of, Greg and Samantha's friends headed back to the Montgomery Avenue location to show Samantha's photos. They're knocking on doors, but no one had seen or heard anything out of the ordinary. They looked around everywhere looking for either Samantha or maybe even her phone, any signs of her, and of course, like the other 2 times that her friends had gone, they didn't see anything. Confused and not having any luck now for the third time, they all decide to head up to 5 Points and go to the bars that they were at the night before. They asked around to see if they can see any of the security systems because their friend had been missing. The only bar that was able to provide any surveillance footage was the Bird Dog where Samantha was last seen. And Tegan knew one of the employees, so they were able to actually see the footage for themselves. On the footage at 2:09 a.m., they were able to see Sami standing outside on the curb as if she was waiting for someone and she had been looking down at her phone. After a few moments, a black Chevy Impala pulls up and Sami walks to the car, entering through the back seat on the passenger side, assuming this vehicle was her Uber before pulling out of view of the camera. On this footage, you weren't able to see what the driver looked like and you weren't able to see the license plate number. Another angle that was provided from a few moments before Sami was seen entering that vehicle, she is seen again standing near the curb waiting while she's looking at her phone. You can see the same black Chevy Impala driving up and pulling in the parking lot located behind her. The vehicle goes out of sight for a few seconds, then you see it again, now waiting behind another vehicle to exit. The vehicle is now in direct sight of Sami. While the Chevy Impala is waiting to exit the parking lot, Sami is seen walking up to a vehicle as if she's going to get into this car, but she realizes it's not her Uber ride, so she returns back to the curb. The black Impala, now making a right out of the parking lot towards Sami's direction, pulls up directly in front of her and Sami walks up and gets into the back seat of the vehicle. Soon after seeing the surveillance footage, Tegan and Greg get a hold of the police and they ask them to come in for further questions. During this time, police release Samantha's information about her being missing to the public, in hopes to get information and her whereabouts out there, and also the footage of the black Chevy Impala. After arriving and being questioned by police for a few hours, giving them all the information that they had, Greg says that at some point he noticed that Samantha's family had driven out from Robinsonville. He remembers being in the waiting room with Tegan and some of the other roommates when he noticed Seymour and Marcy looking very distraught. He thought maybe they were just devastated because they didn't know where Samantha was and they were worried for her safety. But he had no idea what was really behind their complete sadness. Right after midnight, going into Saturday morning, police come in to share devastating news with Greg and Samantha's friends. Samantha's body had been found about 14 hours after she was last seen. Her friends and Greg were devastated. They described the moment as feeling numb and it being surreal. Their friend who they were just hung out with, they will never see again. The thoughts of what happened, of course, ran through their mind, and they were just confused. About an hour and 16 minutes away from the bar that Samantha was last seen, around 4 p.m. on Friday, Clarendon County Sheriff's deputies respond to a dead body found approximately 40 feet off of Black Bottom Road. A man named Anders Lee, who was turkey hunting on his friend's family's property in New Zion Field, said he had spotted something from a distance. He ended up grabbing his binoculars. He believed it looked like a dead body laying there. He wasn't sure, so he moved a few steps closer, confirming indeed it was a body lying there in the brush. He told investigators that he and his friend were in disbelief and that he was not expecting to see something like that. This area wasn't a very populated place or a place where someone would just stumble upon. The exact spot would be difficult to get to unless you knew the area. He says that they called law enforcement and they came out immediately to investigate. When arriving, they immediately noticed that Samantha had an earring missing, a broken shoe, drag marks on her back and shoulders. Her fingernails also were ripped and broken. At first glance, they believed that she had fought really hard for her life, and the evidence showed that without a doubt. They carefully took photos and bagged all the evidence that they could, down to the cigarette butts and beer cans that were also located in the area. They did also find tire track marks, which they took photos of those as well. Back at the police station, Greg and Tegan are trying to tell investigators every single detail that they could remember. Tegan tells investigators she remembers seeing Sami alone inside of the bar in a corner on her phone, but she didn't notice Samantha ever leaving the bar until after she got that phone call from Greg around 3:30 in the morning. Saturday morning, Samantha's father, Seymour Josephson, makes a Facebook post announcing his daughter's death, saying, quote, "It is with tremendous sadness and of a broken heart that I post this. I will miss you and love my baby girl for the rest of my life. Samantha is no longer with us, but she will never be forgotten. It is extremely hard to write this and post it, but I love her with all of my heart. I can continue to write about her, but it kills me as I sit here and cry while looking at a picture and write this." end quote. University of South Carolina was also having a very difficult time with Samantha's passing as well. Samantha was the third USC student to pass away that past week. A baseball player died on Friday, March 22nd after collapsing on the field. Another student on March 25th had taken his own life, and then Sami on March 28th. During the investigation, police were trying to find the owner of the black Chevy Impala. Police get a hit on Samantha's bank account. The morning she was last seen, at 5:35 a.m., Samantha's bank account was attempted to be accessed by a man caught on camera. This person was seen walking from across the street alone towards the Wells Fargo location at the Westmark Plaza in Sumter. Suspect was wearing black sweats and also black slides, which were also known as house slippers. He was wearing a black leather jacket with what appeared to be a gray sweatshirt underneath with a hoodie, and also wearing black gloves. The suspect on the surveillance footage is hiding his identity by taking the string of his hoodie and pulling it tight so it closes in on his face. At this location, there was 2 failed attempts to access her account due to the wrong PIN number being entered. 6:47 a.m. there was another failed attempt to access Samantha's bank account. This location was at a Wells Fargo in Hampton Hills, Columbia. Again, due to wrong PIN number being entered, the person attempted to access the account a total of 9 times before giving up and walking away. The same suspect from the first location was caught on surveillance at this location wearing the same attire. I also want to add that Samantha was a college student. She worked part-time, she hadn't started her career yet, so she only had a total of $35 in her bank account. So now police had a vehicle description and also 2 surveillance videos of who they believe the suspect is in Samantha's murder. They put the word out to other officers in the area to be on the lookout for this black Chevy Impala. They also tell officers to pull over any vehicle matching the same description. Police also look into the Uber driver who was actually supposed to pick up Samantha that night. His name is Marcus Williams. Marcus tells investigators that he did receive a call request to pick someone up from the 5 Points area at the Bird Dog Bar. He accepted the request and he headed that way. Once arriving, he did try to contact Samantha's phone number to let her know that he was outside, as he did with all of his customers. He said he did not get a response from her, so he decided to circle around and wait for about 15 minutes. He had tried to call her again and no answer. He then decided to cancel the request. He has not ever been labeled as a suspect or a person of interest. Around 3 a.m. Saturday, March 30th, a Columbia Canine Unit officer found a black Chevy Impala 2 blocks away from the 5 Points area. He proceeds to follow the vehicle before turning his lights on, and this driver is making a lot of turns. Like I think he's trying to see if the officer is going to pull him over or if the officer is following him. But this driver of the Chevy Impala keeps making left turns. The officer then turns his lights on and the driver pulls over in a residential neighborhood. 2 officers then approach the vehicle, one going on the passenger side and one going on the driver's side. The officer first notices a strong odor of marijuana. He asks the driver if he had been smoking, and the driver says earlier in the day, but not any time recently. He then asks to see the driver's ID, and the driver says that he doesn't have any identification. The officer asks the driver to exit the vehicle, which he does comply without incident. But when the officer starts to pat him down, just before the officer is able to tell him that this was just a routine traffic stop, due to his vehicle matching the make and model of a vehicle regarding a missing person, the driver slowly starts to turn towards the officer as if he's going to resist. Another officer walking towards the situation happening notices and starts to kind of run, but then stops, thinking maybe the driver isn't going to resist. But within a few seconds of the officer thinking that, the driver does. He takes off on foot. So then 3 officers began to chase him. Now, while officers are trying to catch up with the suspect, a few other officers are now at the vehicle searching it. First, they find marijuana edibles, an empty box of sandwich baggies. They find a rose gold iPhone, which was in perfect condition, located between the center console and the driver's seat. In the back seat, they notice a significant amount of blood, a child booster seat, a woman's backpack, germicidal wipes, liquid bleach, and also window cleaner. In the trunk, they find more evidence of blood, which was tested and confirmed to be human, and more potential evidence of Samantha's. At this point, they believe that they have the vehicle that they've been looking for and also their suspect. So they quickly call the crime scene investigators to the vehicle. They were able to catch up with the suspect after a few minute foot chase, and they bring him back to the vehicle, and he's telling them he's having trouble breathing because he has the flu. So they end up calling EMS in, and they assessed him, find out nothing's wrong, and they release him back into police custody. Police then read him his rights and begin to identify who their suspect was. The man was eventually identified as Nathaniel Rowland, who went by the nickname Nate. Nate was arrested and booked into the Richland County Jail for the murder and kidnapping of Samantha. His DNA was collected from his mouth and also underneath his fingernails. Looking into Nathaniel's criminal background, comes out that in October 2018, a woman accused Nathaniel and another male whose name was not made public of carjacking her while she was awaiting at a stoplight. The two men allegedly assaulted her, then forced her to drive to an ATM where they robbed her of money. They then forced her to drive home, where they again robbed her of more items such as a PlayStation 4. Richland County deputies say that hours after the alleged kidnapping, Nathaniel sold the items from the woman he had robbed to a local pawn shop, which he was caught on surveillance camera doing so. Nathaniel was charged with obtaining goods under false premises. That's all that I could find on that particular crime that he did. I couldn't find anything else that he had done. While Nathaniel was being held on bail for the kidnapping and murder of Samantha, police arrive at Nate's girlfriend's house, which her name is Maria Howard. Armed with a search warrant, they enter the home and they confiscate Maria's cell phone. But they do later give it back after it was examined, and they found no evidence of her involvement. During their search, they did check the trash can that was located behind the home and found multiple items that appeared to have blood stains. A sock, a bandana, gray sweatpants, a pillowcase, and also a bed sheet. Also inside, they found a plastic grocery bag. Inside was a camo-colored two-bladed multi-tool with blood on the blade. Found inside Maria's daughter's bedroom closet was a child pair of shoes with dried blood on the bottom. Lastly, some cleaning wipes were found drenched in blood. Everything found was then submitted into evidence. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division worked very hard to examine Nate's vehicle. Inside his vehicle, they noticed almost right away that the child locks were both activated on both back doors. Which, if you don't have any kids and are confused as to what this is,
when set, the doors cannot be opened from inside the vehicle. Set the lock, open the rear door, and move the switch down to the locked position.
police vehicles also use this feature in their arresting vehicles. In the backseat of the vehicle, there was also a visible bare footprint, which would later come back to matching Samantha's footprint. They also found what they believed to be a lot of blood found in the trunk and the back passenger seat of the vehicle. All the evidence and materials containing blood from inside of Nate's vehicle and also the trash can outside of Nate's girlfriend's home all determined to be that of Samantha Josephson. Her DNA confirmed it was her blood. DNA collected from Nathaniel also came back, and Samantha's DNA was found under his fingernails of his right hand. Also, another unrelated DNA profile was found under his fingernails. DNA collected from his left hand, though, had over 5 individual DNA profiles, so they could not determine positive DNA of anyone. The system is only able to identify DNA profiles if there is 4 or less DNA profiles in one sample. The rose gold cell phone that was found was determined to be owned by Samantha and was the cell phone that she actively used. Samantha's autopsy was conducted and determined her death was a homicide due to being stabbed. Pathologist Thomas Beavers stated during Samantha's autopsy that he could not determine the exact number of stab wounds because there were so many, but he estimates approximately 120 stab wounds he could count. He also claims that the injuries on her body were parallel. 2 perfectly parallel cuts that were the same distance apart on multiple parts of her body. Samantha's funeral was held on Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019 at a Jewish cemetery, which was also her final resting place. Samantha was awarded a political science degree in May 2019 at what would have been her graduation ceremony. We're going to skip around a little bit to the trial of Samantha Josephson. Many of you have probably heard of this case or maybe even watched the trial live. If you haven't, I will definitely link the YouTube channel that broadcasted the live trial. Now, there was a lot of information given during these testimonies of over 31 witnesses called by the prosecution, including the turkey hunter who found Samantha's remains, Nathaniel's girlfriend at the time of her murder, also forensic pathologists, arresting officers, and many more. Also, I want to note, defense did not call any witnesses to the stand during the trial, nor did Nate testify on his own behalf. Now, there was a lot of information given during these testimonies of over 31 witnesses called by the prosecution. June 9, 2020, Nathaniel was denied bail in a virtual hearing. Family members of Samantha and Nathaniel delivered statements in front of Judge Benjamin. Then on July 20th, 2020, the trial officially began. Prosecution paints the picture for the jury of how they believe Samantha's life was taken and what they believe Nathaniel's motive was. They believe that Samantha called an Uber at 2:09 a.m. while she was a little intoxicated. She was waiting outside the Bird Dog bar alone for the Uber to arrive. As Nate drove around, he noticed Samantha standing alone, mistakenly walking up to a vehicle before realizing it was not her ride. He watched her return back to the sidewalk while she continued to look down at her phone. Because Nathaniel noticed that this was happening, they believe this is when he preyed on her. He then pulls up in front of her in hopes that she would think that this is her ride, which she does. She gets in through the back passenger seat, then shuts the door. Now, this next part is not proven, it's just speculation as to what they think happened. Samantha is now in the vehicle and she doesn't confirm the identity of the driver. She may have said, "Hi, ride for Samantha," and he may have just agreed. Eventually, Samantha realizes that the car isn't driving in the direction of her home. She begins to ask some questions and not getting any straight answers. She starts to panic, maybe even yelling at Nathaniel, even tries to open the door and realizes the child lock is activated and she was locked in. Maybe even also tried to roll down the window and realizes that that too was locked. Once she realized what was going on, that she had just been kidnapped, she has no idea what this man was going to do, she began kicking Nathaniel repeatedly in the back of the head from the back seat while he was driving. He eventually pulled over, grabbing that two-bladed tool set that he had in his glove compartment, turned around and began to stab her over 120 times. She put her hands up to guard her face out of a natural instinct, the blade of the knife going directly through her right hand. Nathaniel stabbed her through her head with so much force that the knife went through her skull to her brain. Many of her wounds were through her right neck and her right shoulder. She also had been stabbed in her torso, back, lung, leg, and feet. But she was still alive and she was still fighting, until he stabbed her in one of two of her carotid arteries that carried blood to her head. She bled profusely, which ultimately is what caused her death within 10 to 20 minutes. During her autopsy, when they were trying to collect her blood for comparison, our body normally has at least 4 liters of blood. But the pathologist could not collect any more than 1/3 tablespoon of blood from her body. After murdering Samantha, they believed he robbed her of her credit card, and that this is where he was seen on camera at the first location in Columbia at the Wells Fargo Bank. Then heading to the second location in Sumter, which was on the way to New Zion, where her body was found. He drove an hour and a half to New Zion Field, where he took her body out of the vehicle and dragged her about 40 feet off the dirt road, before leaving her remains in a wooded area. Nathaniel is believed to have known this particular area due to some information they obtained of Nathaniel being a former resident of Clarendon County. There's so much to put in this video, so I'm gonna make this video short, and my next video is going to be a part 2, and it's going to be a little bit longer. I want to make this one a little bit shorter so we can have more room in the next video. Part 2 is going to be all about the trial. We're going to hear from testimonies, we're going to go over the evidence, and also we're going to hear what Samantha's family has done to make a change in ride-sharing safety. We're also going to go through all the laws that have changed when it comes to ride-sharing due to Samantha's story. So hopefully you guys want to hear all that, and I will catch you guys in my part 2 video. Bye!